deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals. Because of the program's theme and controversial subject matter, parental discretion should be exercised.
From 1984 to 1990, a grandmother in her 70s was at the center of the longest criminal trial in U.S. history. Virginia McMartin's Daycare was accused of multiple cases of child abuse, and she and her son Raymond, Bucky, were on trial. Prosecutors described a heinous operation where children posed for pornographic photos, were forced to have sex with animals, and were abused in a secret underground tunnel system. There were supernatural elements to the children's accusations as well. Daycare workers could fly, witches appeared, and one of the children even identified Chuck Norris as an abuser. After 6 years, millions of dollars, and a media circus, the McMartin trial resulted in no guilty verdicts. A retrial also failed to convict the family. No tunnels were found, no physical evidence of abuse was uncovered, and a contradicting web of testimony from children fell apart given any scrutiny at all. In the end, Virginia McMartin lost her daycare, her life's passion and work, and was left with an unshakable notoriety. Across the country, other daycares faced similar cases, all of which had a predictable structure. One child or parent would come over with an accusation of abuse, which would be made public. As the investigation went on, more lurid details of systemic abuse would be discovered, usually related to satanic worship. Then, months or years later, the web would unravel, with children admitting that no abuse took place at all. This Satanic Panic, as it would become to be known, presented a unique challenge to investigators. There was no protocol at the time on how to interview children about abuse. In the McMartin case, the CII, an anti-abuse organization of psychologists, was enlisted to conduct interviews. This decision would turn out to be catastrophic for both McMartin and the children. Once interviews started, the number of accusations began to grow in scope. All employees in the daycare were implicated. Children described a supernatural, lurid tale. Hundreds of children had been sacrificed. The daycare workers would drink blood and kill animals. Children were passed about in what would be, if true, the largest human trafficking ring ever discovered. The accusations weren't limited to McMartin. In Kern County, California, 36 people were convicted when 60 children came forward with accusations of abuse. In Edenton, North Carolina, 90 children came forward with allegations of seeing the murder and torture of babies, including being thrown into a pool of sharks. 7 were convicted. In 1991, 2 daycare owners were sentenced to 48 years in Oak Hill, Texas. The thread connecting all these cases was Satanism. Victims, and occasionally prosecutors, alleged that there was a nationwide network of devil worshippers that would not stop the abuse until they had shaped the country in their image. The sensation wasn't limited to children either. Notable feminist Gloria Steinem wrote self-help books targeted at women who had recovered memories of ritual or cult abuse. In 1980, Michelle Smith came out with Michelle Remembers, a book written with her former psychiatrist, now husband, Lawrence Padzer. It details the repressed memories she recovered in therapy sessions of being ritually abused by the Church of Satan. The final session of abuse involved an 81-day ritual when she was 5 that summoned the devil until Jesus and the Virgin Mary intervened. And these outlandish accusations made ritual abuse cases a feeding frenzy for the media. The Satanic Panic played into fears about changing norms. And the 1980s were a scary time. Women were entering the workplace, Ozzy Osbourne was singing about trains and the devil, and Mike Dukakis was almost president even though he couldn't drive a tank. Amongst all this, there was one hero waiting to expose evil and shine light on the worst problem society had to face. Geraldo Rivera.
The Investigative News Group presents the Geraldo Rivera Special. Devil Worship. Exposing Satan's Underground.
Devil Worship, Exposing Satan's Underground was an exploitative, trashy, yellow journalism television documentary concocted by Geraldo Rivera. It's awful, and 18.3 million people watched it. It was the highest ratings NBC had ever received for a 2-hour documentary. Law enforcement officers, a priest, and the parents of supposed victims of satanic abuse all tell their shocking stories. They plead for law enforcement and parents to take their warning seriously. Satanism is real, and it is dangerous.
It certainly is. There have been many cases down through the centuries, many in our own decade, for example, of where the devil has actually possessed people and caused them to do many strange things.
Geraldo focuses on grisly murders. Somebody pointing out pentagrams drawn around the scene, focusing on the metal music that perpetrators listen to. The McMartin parents were also there. Geraldo sells the fear. After every commercial break, he gives a bleak content warning and begs parents, please, God, get your kids out of the room.
Now, the very young and the impressionable should definitely not be watching this program tonight. This is not a Halloween fable. This is a real-life horror story, and it will give small children bad dreams.
Now, as a quick sidebar, it's important to recognize that there are people out there who identify as Satanists, but most aren't strictly theists. The Church of Satan is a skeptically atheist organization who embraces the symbol of Satan as a criticism of organized religion. They don't believe in a physical devil. They certainly don't serve the devil, and their philosophy centers around creating a society based on rational self-interest. Ayn Rand could have been a Satanist if she wasn't actually Satan. As soon as the Satanic Ritual Abuse allegations began, police searched for a pattern. Suddenly, this new crime was everywhere. Hundreds of cases all across the country where shadowy figures were supposedly running intricate human trafficking organizations, yet leaving no physical trace. Law enforcement developed trainings to spot the signs of Satanism. One document from the Chicago Police Department from 1989 warns to look out for youth subculture, skinheads or punkers, or bored kids. Once law enforcement was looking for these signs, everything was a possible satanic case. 190 were charged across the country with child abuse and human trafficking, striking a major blow to the satanic forces that would attempt to destroy our way of life. Except, most of those defendants would be acquitted. Just a few years after the hysteria, most of the accusations would be viewed as the result of a moral panic instead of actual abuse. And since the hysteria subsided in the 1990s, most of these satanic panic cases have been overturned. But we've failed to contend with the hysteria and the lives it destroyed. But most importantly, this panic created a false image of what abusers look like, and has made us more susceptible to predators. The organization charged with interviewing the children at the center of the McMartin trial was the CII. No one had ever had to do interviews like this before, and the CII made several crucial missteps. Children were kept and interviewed for hours, and interviewers wouldn't stop until they got the accusation they desired. During these sessions, the CII regularly encouraged the ideas of play and imagination. While this was intended to put children at ease, it ended up pushing children to make surreal stories. They claimed to have been taken to satanic ritual sites, saw their teachers fly like witches, and to have witnessed multiple murders. This transcript shows how interviewers used reinforcement to nudge children into making accusations. Mr. Monkey is a little bit chicken, and he can't remember any of the naked games. But we think that you can because we know Naked Games that you were around for, because the other kids told us. And it's called Naked Movie Star. Do you remember that game, or is your memory too bad? I don't remember that game. It's a little song that me and a friend had heard of. Well, I heard out loud someone singing Naked Movie Star, Naked Movie Star. You know that, Mr. Alligator? That means that you're smart, because that's the same song the other kids knew, and that's how we know you're really, really smarter than you look. So you better not play dumb, Mr. Alligator. Well, I didn't really hear a whole lot. I just heard someone yell it from outside. Someone yelled it. Maybe, Mr. Alligator, you peeked in the window one day and saw them playing it, and maybe you could remember and help us. Well, no, I haven't seen anyone playing Naked Movie Star. I've only heard the song. What good are you? You must be dumb. After the first accusation in McMartin was made, a letter was sent out to all the parents of the children asking them to probe their kids for information about the abuse. Parents communicated with each other before their child's interview and appeared to influence their children. This cross-germination occurred in many instances. Children were told pieces of privileged information, sometimes by the people that were interviewing them, about what other children had said. Then, the fact that they had made the same accusation was held up as a sign of the children's credibility. If the children tried to take back their claim, they weren't believed. They were simply told that they were in denial. Here's New York Times coverage of a court trial from the 1991 daycare abuse case from Texas. Did Danny ever touch you in a way you didn't like? Assistant Director Attorney Judy Shipway asked. No, Christina replied. Did Fran ever touch you in a way you didn't like? Shipway asked. No, the girl replied. Shipway tried a different approach. Did Christina tell anyone else that Danny hurt her? She did not reply. Shipway asked if Christina would like to whisper to me. Her answer? No, she said. Christy, when you say no, do you mean you don't want to talk about it? Or do you mean no, it didn't happen? No, it didn't happen, Christina replied once, and then again. No, it didn't happen. But did you tell somebody it happened? Shipway asked. Yes, 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 she answered. This testimony was not considered credible. She was just in denial. And as the supposed victims of ritual abuse grew up, they began to recant their claims. In describing their experience with a Bakersfield abuse case, several victims tried to write the claims they had made as children. Each of them had said he always knew the truth, that Stoll had never touched them. Each said that he felt pressured by the investigators to describe sex acts. Even though the alleged abuse hadn't happened, that doesn't mean the children weren't victims. One psychologist involved in the case told The Times, "Before I met them, I didn't appreciate that these kids, who had not been sexually abused, would have experienced trauma comparable to kids who had been." Part of the tragedy of the Satanic Panic is that even though the events didn't happen, those memories don't stop being real to the kids. And whether repressed memories exist at all is a hotly debated subject in psychology, but the APA holds that it is impossible to distinguish between repressed memories and false memories without corroborating evidence. And in the case of the Satanic Panic, there is none. No physical evidence was found in any of these cases. No animal skeletons from sacrifices, no systems of tunnels, no missing children. No Shark Tank. Most defendants were acquitted when victims recanted their claims or when evidence, or lack thereof, was examined. The book Michelle Remembers was roundly debunked, and inconsistencies in the book were discovered. Former neighbors of Michelle Smith scoffed at the idea that a 5-year-old could disappear for 81 days and no one notice. Her psychologist and husband, Padzer, eventually said that it didn't matter whether the events actually happened. What mattered is that they were real to Michelle. Which brings us to Geraldo Rivera's blockbuster documentary. Geraldo didn't just argue against Satanism, he also hosted proponents for the devil. On the side of Satan was Ozzy Osbourne, the daughter of the founder of the Church of Satan, and a U.S. Army colonel who was also a Satanist. They mostly get yelled at, but they also get in some solid points.
Violent crimes in the devil's name?
You find one common thread to that, and that all these people that you've shown tonight come from a background in which their moral instruction has been from a religious tradition other than ours. It may be Father Labar's, it may be some other mainstream one, but it is not that of Satanism.
The crux of Geraldo's argument is based on a death row convict who tried to claim he was possessed by Satan to avoid execution, and many people who profited a ton off of the panic. The connections to Satan are limited, and the whole thing seems goofy in hindsight. The story surrounding supposed satanic ritual abuse is one that is terrifying, yet satisfying to believe in. It's a simple worldview. Abuse is the result of shadowy, evil figures attempting to tear down our moral way of life. There are clear signs of danger, though, and we can protect ourselves if we recognize those signs. This is an enemy that can be defeated, and then we can go back to our way of life, the fabric of our society sturdier than ever. But this is not how abuse usually happens. Most abuse occurs within the family. That same moral way of life is the trust abusers rely on. They are intimately woven into the fabric of society, not outside influencers. At the same time the Satanic Panic was going on, there was an actual conspiracy to hide the sexual abuse of children. The Catholic Church regularly moved or laicized priests with abuse allegations against them instead of turning them into the police. One of those accused priests is James Labar, the same priest from the Geraldo Rivera special. He was accused of child abuse after his death in 2008, and he used his platform of 18 million people to preach about the dangers of Satan, rock and roll, and eroding morals. The world is falling apart, and the church is a safe haven. Trust the man in the collar. He will keep you safe.